Welcome to Discover Your Roots, a podcast that will give you tools for understanding and applying the wisdom of the Bible in your own context. I'm Avery Chenault, and this season we're exploring the land of the Bible. We'll be joined by various biblical scholars who bring insight into the land of the Bible to help us understand God's Word more deeply. Join us as we trace the map of God's story. In the wilderness of En Gedi, David hid in caves while King Saul hunted him with thousands of soldiers. In the same rugged landscape of sheepfolds, streams, and shadowed valleys that shaped David's prayers and songs. In this episode, we'll explore how the setting of En Gedi brings fresh depth to David's story and the words of Psalm 23. Today's guest is Bobby Moss, a pastor and professor in Chicago and a longtime friend of Pastures who's been to Israel many times. If you missed his first episodes, you should definitely go back and check it out. Bobby, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited to have you back for this conversation about En Gedi.
My privilege. I'm excited to be back.
So En Gedi is a really cool site that you'll likely visit on your passages trip. So we're going to get into some of the uniqueness and beauty of En Gedi. But per usual, I want to start by reading our scripture for today. So we're going to start off today in 1 Samuel 24. So that says, when King Saul returned from following the Philistines, he was told, "Behold, David is in the wilderness of En Gedi." Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel and went to seek David and his men in front of the wild goats' rocks. And he came to the sheepfolds by the way where there was a cave, and Saul went in to relieve himself. Now David and his men were sitting in the innermost parts of the cave, and the men of David said to him, "Here is the day of which the Lord said to you, Behold, I will give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as it shall seem good to you." Then David arose and stealthily cut off a corner of Saul's robe. And afterward, David's heart struck him, because he had cut off a corner of Saul's robe. He said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to put out my hand against him, seeing he is the Lord's anointed." So David persuaded his men with these words, and did not permit them to attack Saul. And Saul rose up and left the cave and went on his way. So we have this really interesting scene that's happening in En Gedi. David is hiding in the caves. He's being pursued by 1,000 men, and not just 1,000 men, but 1,000 men that were hand chosen by Saul. So this is a pretty intense scene that's happening here. So in your own words, what is En Gedi, and can you kind of tell us where it is and what its name means?
Yeah, so En Gedi is just such a really cool biblical site for people who are going to be visiting Israel. It's okay just to say it's so much fun and beautiful. It's it's an oasis in the desert. It's the most simple way to put it. It's in the Judean Desert. It's kind of roughly halfway between Masada and Qumran, and you are driving through, again, beautiful landscape, but it's all brown and grays and kind of dim, and all of a sudden you come to this place where there's waterfalls and green and trails and little goats walking around. Like, it's just this really amazing oasis in the desert type of a thing. And I mentioned the goats. En Gedi actually means spring of the young goat or spring of the wild goat. And you see that when you get there, because there's all these little ibex that are walking around, and they're on the cliffs. Yeah, I remember one of the times that I went, there's like a visitor center with a lower roof, and there was all these ibex on the roof, and you're walking about looking at them. And so it lives up to its name. There's all these ibex, and they're there, the green that they can eat, and the water, they're there for the oasis as well. And so it's really just this beautiful place in the desert, this beautiful, green, living, lush, thriving area in the midst of the Judean Desert. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I love En Gedi, and I also love the ibex. I just love them. I think they're so cute. I have so many photos on my phone of them at En Gedi because I just love them. But it's like a wonderful nature area. And actually some of my favorite passages memories have happened at En Gedi. I remember going on one trip, and it was, towards the end of a pretty long trip, just you're getting so much information on the passages trip, seeing so many sites, and it was hot. It was, I think, probably the middle of May or June or something like that. And it was over 100 degrees outside. And we went on this hike, which was obviously a gorgeous hike, but it was very strenuous and very hot. And then we saw this gorgeous waterfall in the middle of the desert, which is just phenomenal. It's incredible that even exists. And we all got to get in and swim and take photos and just have a little rest. And everybody just got so happy. And it was so exciting to see. And we all were laughing and like splashing around in the water, and it was
Yeah.
just so fun. So En Gedi has been the site of many of my favorite pastures memories. So I'm sure you can relate.
Yeah, it's that's I think what you hit right there, Avery, is really important because anytime I've ever been to Engedi with anyone, you can see faces lighten up. It's just, not that it's grueling anywhere, but I mean, everybody's happy. But even the happiest person, when you get back into these trails and you see the waterfalls, you just light up brighter. And it
Hmm.
is. I mean, you're dipping in the pools, you're standing under waterfalls, to kind of walk into this oasis. There's actually a trail that goes up higher, and we were able to go up there one time, and there's actually a little pool up there. So the students I was with, they don't do this on every passages trip, so don't, have fair expectations, but we were up
Hmm.
there and, people are cannonballing into this little
Yeah.
pond. Like it's just not what you would think when you think Judean Desert, that's not it. And so it really is just this green, lush, beautiful place. If I ever heard the word, Oasis in the desert or something like that, not the band, but like an oasis, I'm going to think En Gedi because that's just what it is. It's
Yeah.
so beautiful and so much fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to hear if there's any other impressions you have from En Gedi, maybe particularly when it relates to David's story, any picture that you can paint for us, anything you'd like to share there.
But yeah, when you walk into En Gedi, there's just these large hills, not mountains generous, but like hillsides, and you can
Hmm.
see the caves along the side, and of course the adventurous, one wants to go up and, oh, what's in that cave type of a thing. And there's a lot of them. But that's the kind of picture we have. We don't know which cave it would have been or what that would have looked like, but and you're standing where the passage took place. And so it says that
Hmm.
Saul went in. I always tell my students there's humor in the Bible. You just have to find it. And to me, this is a very
Yeah.
humorous passage in the Bible because
Hmm.
David's hiding in the back of this cave, and the guy who's looking for him comes into the cave to go to the bathroom. And so it's like,
Yeah.
can you imagine being in the back of this cave while this is happening? But that's the image that we have here. He's hiding in this cave. And not only was it a place of refreshment, but it's a place of refuge. Like that's why David went here. Like not only will I be
Hmm.
refreshed, but I can hide here. I can find a place to get away from the one who's hunting me. And so he's in this cave, and we have the imagery. It says the sheepfolds by the way, and so there's again the shepherd coming to a place where he might be familiar with, or familiar with even just the idea of the sheep that are there. You're walking in the passage when you walk into En Gedi.
Hmm. Absolutely. And you really know that this is where the story happened because it's not like there's many other an oasis in the desert that could be mistaken for En Gedi. Like this is where it happened, which is really
Yeah,
cool to see.
yeah, like, you could tell somebody like, I'm going to meet you at this coffee shop, and then they show up at another coffee shop because there's so many in the city. That
Yeah.
mistake could happen, but there's no other En Gedi in this area. I mean, like there's just
Yeah.
one place that's like this. So there's,
Hmm.
you are literally walking the area that is being talked about in this passage. And so you human, David talking about, the story talking about David's experience and him fleeing from Saul, coming
Hmm.
to find refuge. Other passages where he talks about the deer panting by the water, or we're going to look at Psalm 23. He might not be mentioning this specifically, but the imagery is there. And so it just
Hmm.
comes alive. You know what he's talking about? Like within all of this desert, here's a place I can come to find rest. Here's a place I can come
Yeah.
for refreshment, to be renewed, to hide if need be. And it's a really
Hmm.
powerful image to see.
Yeah, it definitely is. So now I'd love to learn a little bit about why did David find himself in this situation at En Gedi?
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to really go back toward the beginning of First Samuel, and we have Saul who's made king, and he doesn't live up to what God has called him to do. He fails. I mean, there's really no other way to put it, but he fails. And David is called to be the new king, and we have the whole story with David and Goliath in First Samuel 17:18, and after that, there's a lot of interaction with the Philistines and battle with them. And so we kind of come to this story. We have a jealous Saul who's angry at David and doesn't want him to take this
Mhm.
place and wants to remove his successor, if you will. And so it's really this Saul showing his true colors, that he doesn't fit the kingship role that he has, and why he is a
Mhm.
failed king. And really what's amazing in this story is that when you see David in hiding in this cave, and the guy who's coming to attack him is right there, he could have killed Saul like that. I mean, this was the opportunity to kill him. He cuts a piece of his robe off, and even the idea of cutting that royal robe convicts David. He feels horrible about that
Hmm.
idea. So when he comes out and he confronts Saul, it's really showing David's heart in that regard. He's showing him to be the more honorable one, if you will, and how he's handled even interacting with his enemy, interacting with Saul and not killing him, not acting as Saul has been. I mean, it's just David showing at that time, David's not responsible for Saul's demise. Saul's responsible for his own. And even in this, he's
Hmm.
not responsible for anything that happens with Saul. Saul has put himself in this situation. And so this idea of David coming and finding refuge, it hasn't changed his character at all. He hasn't gotten lax. He's still acting the king that he's going to be. And sure, he's going to fail later in his life, but here, at least right now, he's doing as he should, and it's showing his heart toward the Lord.
Yeah, it's really cool to see how David was able to have mercy on Saul in that way. And he really could have killed his enemy and the whole situation could have been over. But David displayed restraint and reverence for what God was commanding him to do. So I think that there's something we can all learn from that story and apply to our own life and situation for sure.
Yeah, yeah, getting back at somebody might be easier. It might seem justified, but what does the Lord want us to do? And so we really see David acting honorable here, acting, vengeance is of the Lord's, judgment is of the Lord's. He's not taking that into his own hands. And so, yeah, really his colors, and again, he's gonna mess up later in life, but at least right
Yeah.
now he's doing as he should be, and it's powerful to see.
Yeah, definitely. So we talked a lot about David's story here at En Gedi. Can you tell us where else En Gedi is mentioned in the scriptures?
Yes, so there's a couple places that I marked down that I thought were really interesting that mention En Gedi specifically. One of them is Song of Solomon, specifically Song of Solomon 1:14. It says, "My beloved is to me a cluster of henna blossoms in the vineyards of En Gedi." And so using this imagery to talk about his beloved, that she's like flowers, plants, whatever this henna blossoms are that are found in En Gedi. And so it's,
Hmm.
he's using romantic language. He's comparing his beloved to these beautiful flowers. We see, again, you're going through the desert, you come to this beautiful place. I mean, it's there's a lot of opportunity for romantic language there and poetic language there. And so the author of Song of Solomon's, tapping into what would have been familiar to people at the time. And my
Hmm.
beloved is as beautiful as flowers as you would see in this place. My beloved is as beautiful as what we find in En Gedi. And so yeah, so it's really cool to see again this oasis that's used in a way to even talk about romantic love between man and a woman. It's really cool in that regard.
Hmm.
A second one is Ezekiel 47. Ezekiel 47 says, "Fishermen will stand beside the sea. From En Gedi to Engalim, it will be a place for the spreading of nets. Its fish will be of very many kinds, like the fish of the great sea." Now, the fish of the great sea, that's the Mediterranean, but when it says from En Gedi to Engalim, and I'm probably mispronouncing that, so I apologize, but it's basically talking about from En Gedi to the Dead Sea. And the Dead Sea is
Hmm.
not fresh water. I mean, if you feel refreshed being in En Gedi, you feel the exact opposite being in the Dead Sea. The lowest
Yeah.
point, there's, high saturation of salt, so much salt, you're floating within it. There's nothing alive in this lake. And so what Ezekiel is saying though is that we are going to see people are going to be able to fish even here in a place where they wouldn't
Hmm.
associate with that. So it's really this really powerful image of spiritual renewal and abundance. That's, what you see in En Gedi, you're going to see in places that are the opposite of it. And so again,
Yeah.
the oasis is used to really paint a picture of hope that's coming within the Lord's work and
Hmm.
the Lord's plan.
Yeah, it's a really powerful image thinking about the Dead Sea and then thinking about En Gedi, which is so lush and fresh water and green and very cool, and then going to the Dead Sea, which is the complete opposite. That really is a very powerful image. And I love what you were saying about renewal. Um, and it was making me think of Psalm 23, which Psalm 23 doesn't specifically mention En Gedi, but knowing that David did spend time there, there is a chance perhaps maybe it was influenced by that. But there's a lot of similar themes in Psalm 23 can be reflected in En Gedi as well. So I'd love to read part of that psalm, and I'd love to have a discussion about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemy. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." So this is one of the most famous psalms, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this when it comes to King David and En Gedi.
Yeah, I think that you mentioned it well, that we wouldn't say that this is exactly about En Gedi, but we definitely see some of the word pictures here and some of the imagery. I mean, this is something David's familiar with, something that David is used to. There's a reason why he went to En Gedi when Saul was chasing him. He's aware of this. And we see
Hmm.
his experiences coming out and how he writes his psalms and everything that he produces. And so, I mean, some of the language here, again, the Lord is my shepherd. And so we know in En Gedi, we have the sheepfold. And so there's going to be some type of shepherding experience or opportunity that's going to happen there. So that, at least a minor connection, but he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I mean, I think about the idea, especially getting to En Gedi. I mean, again, the Judean Desert, it's times it would probably be very scary to walk through here. Other bandits, other
Yeah.
robbers, the danger of even walking through there. I mean, not that, we would say it's the valley of the shadow of death, but it would definitely be scary and fearful to get through
Yeah.
that at different times. And so here we have this imagery that Dave is familiar with of saying, even though I'm walking through here, even though I'm experiencing this, the Lord is putting me beside thriving places. He's putting me in a place where, again, that idea of renewal that we see from En Gedi, he's restoring my soul. So there's definitely that type of imagery where finding refuge in the Lord, finding renewal in the Lord, the
Hmm.
renewal, the lying by the water imagery, the greenery imagery. I think anything that we see within that, I mean, this Psalm 23 is very shepherding, and so a lot of
Yeah.
it's going to come from there. But these other word pictures, I don't see why it would be hard to see. Like it would be hard to doubt that David doesn't have aspects of En Gedi in his mind, just as far
Hmm.
as what the Lord offers us as far as hope and renewal and joy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely interesting to think about David having experienced everything that he did experience at En Gedi, and then writing words like, "He leads me beside still waters, he
Yeah.
restores my soul." And like you mentioned, the valley of the shadow of death. Was that the area around En Gedi? Like, we don't know for sure, but it really does help you understand more of David's life and maybe some things that could have inspired his writing. So
Yes.
before we move on from that, is there any last thoughts about Psalm 23? Any ways that En Gedi shapes our understanding of this psalm that you want to share?
Well, the thing that I think about how I mean, Psalm 23 really talks about like the journeying with the Lord. I mean, we have our shepherds taking the sheep different places and stuff. And so the leading by still waters, leading me in paths of righteousness, walking through the valley. I mean, David walking through here to the sheepfold, being continually led by the Lord. Like, again, that's
Mhm.
imagery that David would connect with and would lend itself to the reality of with En Gedi. I think when you couple that with a passage like Psalm 18:33. Psalm 18:33 says, "He has made my feet like the feet of a deer and set me secure on the heights." Now, it's talking about a deer in our translation, but I think that that imagery kind of can lend itself more to the ibex, like we would see in
Mhm.
En Gedi. And so them being able to, I mean, it's amazing when you see them on the sides of these hills and these little cracks that they're able to balance on. I think that the idea of God giving us secure footing, God giving us sure foundation,
Yeah.
that we're even able to, whether we're walking through the valley, the shadow of death, or we feel insecure on the heights, God is leading us. God is walking with us, and
Mm.
God has no problem taking us through difficult things, but he's leading us to a place like what we would see at En Gedi. I mean, that's really the beauty of it is Nothing, God never promises us that we will have no difficult times in life. In fact, if anything, he makes it pretty clear
Hmm.
that at times life is going to be really hard. But he always does promise he's going to be with us in it. And he always promises us that with
Yeah.
him, there is a future hope that we have. And so even though we're in
Hmm.
the valley of the shadow of death, it might feel like that for all of our lives, our story ends in green pastures, and our story ends with
Hmm.
him in oasis of eternity. And so I think that's one of the really cool things about these pictures, whether it's Psalm 23 or Psalm 18, that En Gedi helps us realize is that that's where the Lord's leading us. The Lord is leading, and He's
Yeah.
leading us to be secure along the journey, knowing that that's the destination we have. And there'll be a lot of ups and downs. There'll be moments where it's all Judean Desert. There'll be moments where it's splashing in a waterfall. But our ultimate journey is into that type of oasis with him. And that's beautiful and encouraging. I mean, that's hope.
Yeah, absolutely. That is such a beautiful picture to think about. And it really helps me understand more some of the meaning of these Psalms and even the portion of Psalm 18 you read, thinking about the ibex balancing on these really crazy places on the rock that you don't think they'd be able to stand, but
Yeah.
God puts them there. And similarly, He will hold us up in really difficult situations that we don't know how we're going to stand. And I think that it's so beautiful how these locations, God not only created them, but He used them to help us understand His story even more deeply,
Yeah.
which I think is really kind of the Lord and really amazing to see for sure.
Yeah, I think when you go back to even what we talked about the last time we discussed, Avery, is, we have to read the passage in light of the world of the Bible and not put our world on it.
Mm,
So obviously there's so many
absolutely.
different people who are watching the podcast from all over the country and even the world. And we all are familiar with our hometown. We're familiar with what our neighborhood looks like. We're familiar with what our community and how far it gets to places, how dry it is, how wet it is, what our summers are like, what our winters are like. And we will naturally read the Bible through that filter. And we need
Hmm.
to interpret scripture through the filter of understanding where it came from, because those are
Hmm.
those are the word pictures that they're talking about. So when David's talking about these green pastures, when he's talking about Heinz places, I mean, he's not talking about where I'm from. He's not talking about where you're from. He's talking
Yeah.
about where he's from. So that's why it's really
Hmm.
powerful to look at En Gedi, because you can look at the map and you can see all this brown and you zoom into this one little place and it's, wow, that place
Hmm.
is really special. And you can see the caves and you can see the waterfalls and you can see the green. And that's not what my home looks like. That's not what where I'm from looks like. But it's
Yeah.
so I can take that and I can then when I read this story, it's oh, that's what he's talking about. That's the
Hmm.
intent here. We want our understanding of the Bible to be more three dimensional than it is usually. And that's one of the beauties
Yeah.
of looking at a passage in light of its cultural historical context, in light of looking at just even the geography, like what we're doing throughout the season, is it helps the Bible become 3D. It helps me put myself in that place to where I'm not superimposing modern ideas, my place onto it. But really, we always say we want to read the passage in context. And this is part of the
Hmm.
context, is to read it from that place, not my place.
Absolutely. Well, this has been really helpful to understand more of the context that you were discussing. I know I've learned a lot in this episode, so thank you so much for sharing with us. But before we conclude, I want to ask you one final question, and that is how should this story that we've discussed today change us as people?
Well, yeah, I think I would go back to some of the things that we've said. The idea of, again, look at David's experience and he's being hunted, he's fearful, he's being, yeah, somebody trying to kill him, take him out. And he runs to this place of sanctuary. He runs to this place this oasis in the middle of the desert. And I think that not that that's exactly what the passage is about, but I think that there's something about that for us to consider is that we all are again, we all have our difficulties. We all have our challenges. We have the
Hmm.
things that are really hard in life and are uncertain. And sometimes life can be really, really scary. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know why this person's doing this. And the Lord tells us that He's our sanctuary. He tells us that He's our refuge. I mean, Psalm 121, he talks about we can hide within the comfort of His wing. He cares and protects us. And so I think the idea of David, like showing us, hey, I'm coming to this place to find refuge. Think about what God is offering us. He's offering us refuge. He offers us
Yeah.
care. Again, it doesn't mean that the trouble's going to go away. It doesn't mean that the problem's going to go away. It might never, but it does tell us that God's
Hmm.
with us through it. And for me personally, that just is really encouraging. There's times where the unknown can be really stressful, not
Hmm.
knowing what's, again, what the next couple months are going to look like, or what's going to happen. That can cause a lot of anxiety, that can cause a lot of fear. But I think about, Psalm 23, I'm going to rest in the Lord, I'm going to follow his leading. I think about, that hope of renewal that Ezekiel points to, that has to guide us. And En Gedi is just that beautiful thing. Again, think about every time I've been there with students, you can see the point where they light up. The tiredness of the trip, the exhaustion of the trip. I mean, it's all great, but it's tiring. But it doesn't matter how tired a student
Yeah.
is, when they turn that corner and they see that waterfall, when they see that green, there's just something that changes in their face. And that's what God offers us with life with him, is that we have somebody that fills us and gives us joy and gives us hope. And even in the worst of times, we have a refuge in him. And so that's why I think this story is so important. These stories, that's why I think this place is so important for us to understand these stories, because it points to and it
Yeah.
alludes to all that God is doing and has done, and what he offers us. And I know I need that hope and I need that joy, and Getty is just a great reminder of that, what the Lord does.
I completely agree. And it's been such a privilege to walk through this story of what happened at En Gedi today. And thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. I know it was personally really encouraging for me to think about and just exciting to reflect on En Gedi and the significance that it means in the Bible and for our faith. So, Bobby, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We appreciate it.
Again, I love it. My privilege.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Discover Your Roots. For more resources, be sure to check out the links in the show notes. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. To learn more about Passages, visit www.pastagesisrael.org or follow us on Instagram @pastagesisrael.